Thank you and welcome back. We just had to get a little clarification on a particular item, and welcome back, everyone.
Thank you, Council. So to carry on, we are at the Statement of Operations. This is a new format, so allow me to explain it. The green on the far right-hand side, that is a comparison of Q1 of 2022 back against the same quarter of last year. The middle section in the yellow, that is the Q1 for 2022 against budget with the variances. This presentation of the Statement of Operations is based on the type of activity. And overall, for the first quarter, the town is sitting at a positive variance of $180,000, where we had budgeted to be more expenses by just shy of $1 million. So overall, a strong positive variance of 1.2 million. Q1 being the lightest quarter of the year, it's not a surprise to see something like that. As we go through, you'll see that we will start to go a little bit more and more granular. The next is just a presentation of the expenses. So it's the bottom half of that previous slide. And it's now looking at it through the lens of the various different services or departments that the town provides. And I like this as a connector because as we go in, we're now going to go department by department. So the first department is known as general government. That actually makes up 2 of those line items. That is legislative and administration. And then again, as a quick reminder, anything in blue relates to income and anything written in black relates to the expenses. So in general government, one of the things that we record here is the net municipal taxes. So that is all property tax collected less the education portion that we pay out to the province. So that's what makes it net. In the various quarters, we would anticipate that we would be at a negative variance, so less revenue coming in against the budget, and that's mostly related to supplementals. So those are the property taxes that we get for any new buildings that are gain occupancy throughout the year, and that occurs later in the year, Q4, so that's where we would also see a little bit of catch-up occur. Under user fees, here we have a positive variance of just over 200,000, and that is related to franchise fees. So franchise fees are on both electricity and natural gas. Electricity is a fairly consistent amount of revenue into the town, and natural gas would vary, so a little bit higher in the colder months. So we have that positive variance because of January, February, March being colder months. Government transfers for operating, so this is related to MSI revenue that was budgeted as part of the town hall loan, and so MSI to repay that loan. We are looking at the MSI and all the grants right now, so we'll see this information get caught up. It's just wasn't caught up at Q1. Investment income we spoke of earlier under common themes. And then licenses and permits. This is related to business licenses, and there's 2 issues or areas to highlight for this. One is that we reported the revenue in general government, but we actually budgeted over in planning and development. So you'll see a budget number over there. And then the other is the budget number that you will see in planning and development in a little bit. That's only for the first quarter, whereas we collect the majority of our business license in the first month of the year. So, but we will see those line up. Salary and wages, we talked about earlier. Contract and general services. So this has a positive variance of just over or just under 130,000. Related to the activities of subcontracting, training, and postage. And then the next and the last item on this page is the transfer to individual and organizations. So here we would have nothing being provided in the first quarter where our budget was 10,000. So it's showing a positive variance. And this is just because we haven't provided any grants in the first quarter. Any questions?
Hi, thank you.
Councillor Wiley?
I have another investment question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't totally understand why municipalities invest. That's just my ignorance, especially when we have like a low reserve fund. But one number that really surprises me on here is we have, let's say right now we're sitting at $11.7 million in investments, but we only made like just under 15,000 in the first quarter off of that.
Great question. So there's two things to consider in the investment income line. There's the interest that we earn on the bank account, and that's going to be paid out every month and pretty predictable. And then it's the investment earnings. So the investment earnings in the portfolio are majority interest earned, but we don't receive that interest. I'm going to rephrase. We receive that interest either once or twice a year.
So this just might not be a first quarter interest payment.
Right. We may not have much of our investments done in the first quarter, and if that's the case, we'll see it play catch up later on. It's sporadic throughout the year.
Okay.
Councillors, Councillor Mitzner or Deputy Mayor Peterson, do you have any questions from what we've done so far? Okay.
Thank you. The next area is protective services. So this brings together everything related to policing, so RCMP, fire, emergency management, building inspection, and CPO or peace officers, community peace officers. Overall, this particular area is fairly close to budget from a variance perspective. So the investment in salary and wages we discussed in common themes. And then under contracted in general, there is a negative variance, but this is really more of a timing issue because we pay for an annual fee for the fire dispatch. We pay it in the first quarter, however, budget hasn't quite caught up to it. The next area is transportation. So under the user fee and sale of goods, there is a positive variance of about 20,000, and this is related to, again, it's an annual rent that we've received for communications. So I believe it's communication towers, and so budget will play catch up on that. And then there's some seasonality that comes in for the contracted in general and material, goods, supplies, and utilities. Environmental services, this includes...
Sorry, could I ask one question?
Sure can.
It's just a general question. When the solar farm starts to provide regular leasing and property tax payments, which section would we see that as a line item? Do we know where that would be put in eventually?
It is a great question this way. So the property tax would come under here.
Yeah.
I would have to have a look under solar farms, under the rental. I'm not quite sure where that would go.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Might go under operations would be my guess. Yeah. We'll let you know. We'll get back to you on that. Farms rental. Okay. So environmental services. This is for water, wastewater, storm, and solid waste. This is the services here. And there is a negative variance related to the user fee and sale of goods. And that is related to potable water. And potable water is seasonal. We tend to see it the months of June, July, August, and September. So we may not see that negative variance play catch up in quarter 2, but we should see it by the time quarter 3 is done. And for contracted and general services and the material, goods, supplies, and utilities, these two numbers were actually because one item was budgeted in one section and spent and recorded in another. So as we see these things, we'll be correcting them for the next budget cycle so that that type of thing does not stand out. And from an accountant's perspective, I was really impressed that I was so close on the variances. It's just by luck. For public health, this includes family and community social services, the handy bus and cemetery. Under the user fee and sale of goods, so this is an annual allotment for the Canadian Heritage Grant was the cause of that. And then under other, sorry, that title is probably wrong. I believe that title should go to government transfers for operating. My apologies on that. And then under other, the positive variance is related to the Smile Cookie event. On the expense side, the positive variance for the contracted and general services is related to subcontracted support and training activities. And then the transfers to individuals and organizations. This negative variance is related to an annual payment that we paid out to the Growing Families Society for the East Rural Communities. So the budget will play catch up as we go through. Under planning and development, license and permits. So this is the business license topic that was mentioned under general government. So here's where we have the budget for that particular line item with the revenue being reported in general government. And then recreation and culture. So this includes a number of different services from the curling rink, the family center, the aquatic center, the sports center, Lambert Center, civic center, parks, library, and museum. For the user fee and sale of goods, the facility rentals is seasonal, but it's seasonal in that it's busier in the colder months and less busy in the warm months. So that's why we have a positive variance here. And we touched on this earlier, that the government transfers for operating is related to the repayment for town hall related to the MSI. So that will also get corrected when we look at the MSI activity, or when we complete the look at the MSI activity. And then on to the expense side, again, it's seasonality for contracted and general, seasonality for material, goods, and supplies. And then under the transfers to others, that would be the annual support payment that was paid for the library, and that the budget will play catch up as we go through the year. That is everything related to the operating by the different departments. Before we move on, is there any questions with those?
Are there any questions from our counselors online? Can you still hear me at home? We'll just see if we have a connection. Deputy Mayor, do you have questions? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear. Yeah, every once in a while there's glitches, but I was just wondering, you know, this is another upgrade to the budgeting process that Strathmore's councils are undertaking, and it's certainly better. It's an improvement, and it's great to see. And I just have one really, I'm assuming that we will publish this as we always do, so that that our public can see it. But Brenda had some really brief comments at the beginning talking about what the colors meant and what they designated in her report. And I'm just thinking that if that could be noted when it's released to public, it would be, I think, extremely helpful for for people wanting to have a look at this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Wiley?
My question, just out of curiosity, so what is our total municipal annual budget?
Are you looking at the overall spend?
Well, when I was on page 21, if I just took the total expenses 8 million times 4, I got 32 million. And then I'm wondering if you add capital to that, or so is our budget closer to 32 or 40?
So there's two things. You would take 32, but then you'd also want to add in the education requisition because that's netted out of revenue. And then you'd also add in the capital. And the capital can vary year over year. So 32 would be your starting point, and I would have to look at those other numbers, but I can share that.
It's closer to 40 though.
It'll be closer to 40.
Okay.
It probably might even be over 40, because I believe in the capital, we're at 7, nearly 8 million there. And then there's still the requisition to add in.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay. There is just the, the capital side to go through, which is quick. Sorry, it's 7.6 million on capital. There is just over 60, I think it's 61 or 62 projects. For the first quarter, we had just over 20 started and shy of 350,000 spent. So you can see that we are getting ready or partway through at this point. But for quarter one, we were just getting ready to get going on our capital. And that really does conclude the quarter one financial update.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And thank you for being willing and able to answer all those questions.
My pleasure.
So we'll get a quarter two financial report sometime in the fall?
Yeah, we're looking for first council meeting in September.
Okay, thank you. And thank you again. So that brings us to item 8.2, the electricity utility service hedging contract, which is found on page 33.
Thank you, Council. So this is very similar to a presentation that was done back in June about the natural gas hedging. So it's about hedging and it's related to our utilities, and this one specifically to electricity. The town at this point has our hedging in place for electricity until the end of 2026. Sorry, allow me to confirm that. To the end of 2026. However, we're bringing this forward because at this point in time, we have an organization, the Alberta Municipal Services Corp, also known as AMSC, is putting together a project which is a 10-year period for electricity hedging. They're offering it to all municipalities and irrigation districts. AMSC is owned by, or is a subsidiary of, Alberta Municipalities, formerly known as AUMA, or the Alberta Urban Municipalities, but now it's Alberta Municipalities. This 10-year contract is new because typically you're accustomed to possibly hedging out 5 years. So having a longer period of time provides more certainty for the town. This relates to the variable portion of the electricity bill. So what I can share is that with the AMSC offer, that there is a hard deadline tomorrow to sign the contract, and the signatory on the contract is the CAO. It's not a member of council, and it would obligate the city to participate for the years of 2007 to 2033, and it would set the amount of volume of electricity that we would have this set rate at.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor Peterson, do you have a question up to this point?
I can wait till Brenda's
Okay.
finished. Absolutely. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
No rush.
So currently, the market is, if you're looking at the spot market or the market today, you're at over $100 per megawatt. If you're going into a 5-year contract, it's, if I recall, somewhere around $96. What AMSC has in the contract, it's a maximum electricity amount of $68 per megawatt. They will not sign a contract with any providers for any amount greater than that. They have a different target, a slightly lower target internally is what they really are looking for, and that's at 66. So if they do not have a provider come forward to meet that number, they will then just wait a period of time until the market changes, and then they'll go forward again and do another request for proposal to see if providers at that point will bring forward a 10-year commitment at that set rate. If, in fact, it goes to around 2, at that point, then AMSC will either provide an amendment that'll need to be signed off or a brand-new contract. So this contract is only in the instance of AMSC hitting their target rate. The other piece of information that I can share for context for council is that at this point in time, they have about 170 or just over 170 participants signed up. And again, it commits, if we go forward, it commits the town to the volumes that are set. So in a scenario, when we look at those volumes and go, okay, well, what if we don't use all those volumes? What happens with that excess? We can sell it back into the pool for some of those other participants might need to use it, and we'll get a credit back. If we end up using more, then we're either at the market rate for anything above our volume, and if we find that our volumes are consistently high, then we can always look at doing another hedging contract at that point in time. So that's kind of from a risk perspective if we don't hit the volumes that we have.
Councillor Wegener, followed by Councillor Wiley.
So Brenda, you mentioned a credit if we don't use it. Would it be what we paid for it, or would there be would it be offset?
So this is on the variable portion.
Yeah.
So yeah, my understanding is it would be the credit at the rate within the contract. Whatever AMSC ends up signing, I would guess there may be a bit of an administration charge on it, but for the most part, we're getting the majority of that credit back.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wiley, followed by Councillor Montgomery.
So lots of questions, but I'll just start with one for now, and then you can finish the presentation. So historically, 5-year contracts have been just shy of $100 per megawatt, but this AMSC is saying they can hit a target of a maximum of $66.
Right. So great question. So let me just back up a little bit. The electricity market has definitely done an increase on the spot market. It's really increased over the last few years. So if we look at our hedged rates, right now until the end of 2023, we're paying just over $45. We entered into that in 2017. To the end of 2026, it goes up to 53. We entered in that in 2021. So going up to 66 is still an increase, but it's not at today's market rate, which is over 100. So AMSC, so you may be questioning, well, why would a electricity provider sign a contract for $66 or whatever? First, it gives them a guarantee of load and revenue. And so from that perspective, the electricity provider understands or appreciates that volume. The next is that when you look at the two rates within the package, a council's agenda package, if you were signing a 1 year, it was over 100. If you were signing a 5 year, and forgive me, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's 96. So what you're seeing is it's coming down. So you can anticipate that the market is going to start to come down just from that indication, and that's based on today.
And additionally, they're able to be competitive because they're going to be such a large pool.
It's going to be a very
And is
large
171 a large pool? Like, the number is meaningless to me, but
Sure, but that's 170 participants. When you think about that being all the municipalities in Alberta and irrigation districts, we're fairly large consumers. So just kind of scan that across all the towns and the cities and the counties and irrigation districts, and so there will be a very large pool.
so it makes sense for the electricity providers to try to get a competitive rate to attract this large pool.
Yeah, for 10 years,
Right.
right?
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you. I think Councillor Wagner kind of asked this already, but so if any power that we didn't use that we were obligated to purchase, we would be able to get credited the rate that, at 66, we wouldn't be able to get market rate or something like that?
It wouldn't be market rate, it would be rate within what's in the contract. It would be that same rate because we're all in that same big pool.
Yeah.
And then I guess I should add for clarity, I know I said, well, what happens if we use more, if we consume more? I said we'd pay a market rate. Well, what we'd actually do first is we'd go back to the pool and say, hey, does anyone else have excess electricity that we can buy at that rate versus going out to the market rate? So we would do that first.
And is it kind of like an annual allotment, let's say, or is it over the 5 years?
So there is an annual allotment. It was calculated based on the daily average for the town. And so it goes up in the years where we have the leap year and it goes down on the next. So that is actually within the agreement. You can see the chart and that's what it's based on.
And I guess so, because who's going to be monitoring this, I guess, to find out if we have excess power, let's say, or if we have to, who would be doing that?
So part of that we would see through the bills through AMSC. They would be the ones administrating. We would be paying, and then internally we would be monitoring. So as we move through things like capital projects where we're doing more efficiencies, we would see our usage come down. And then as other potential maybe facilities or whatever come on, we would see our usage go up. So, we can see that there's things that we could do that would also affect it outside of what our current position or our current usage is right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I have a very quick and hopefully easy question. I know right now we do have solar panels on a couple of our buildings, which I know kind of feed back into the system. So it's a minor bit right now and it's negligible in the grand scheme of things, but over 10 years it might add up, or more solar generation might come in to be on our facilities. Are we able to use that generation to reduce does that get included in the calculation so that we can maybe bring our usage down even more and sell back more to the pool?
So I believe our consumption would be our total consumption. So if we're consuming less from here, or we're netting it and using it on another building or whatever, it would all get calculated into that bottom total. So it's more as if we were to add new solar somewhere, that's where we would see that impact on the total.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Your Worship?
Deputy Mayor Peterson?
Thank you. So one of the things that, especially commercial interests in the community, that they asked or that they had questions after the last presentation on the power agreements was, how did we get here? And I guess this is a question to administration, or maybe maybe a question for another day, but you know, they want to know, you know, how did we wind up in this environment of AMSC and having to hedge utilities in the way that we're currently doing. And, you know, it's a historical conversation in this province, because certainly not all provinces act this way. And I think our taxpayers are particularly interested in this. So that's that first question is, you know, how on earth did we get here? And the second thing for me is that I know that hedges should only offset exposure. And if I think about it, just only offsetting exposure, and we think about this pool that we're in, and we think that we now have this privatized but almost monopolized process that we currently find ourselves in, that when I look at research processes, that one of the ways that other municipal governments, groups of municipal governments, I guess, have been able to counter this is by looking to comprehensive risk management programs, sometimes from banks and brokers and insurers. And I'm wondering if there's any conversation among the members of this pool into looking at this into the future, because this seems like a very counterintuitive, you know, government imposed or government regulated, unregulated process that caused this new environment. And looking to the future, you know, I'm very much in favor, by the way, of doing this, because it is the only way to bring predictability, but it still leaves us extremely vulnerable. And I'm wondering if there's any other thoughts from our administration around that.
CAO Scoble?
Well, certainly the deputy mayor is correct. You know, it's been a few years. You know, this has been underway for a number of years now. Municipalities have been in these hedging situations for, well, I guess probably maybe 10 years or so, at least. But yeah, you know, there's different ways to look at risk management, and we can look at that in the longer term. I mean, another option, of course, many municipalities are choosing is to increase their own electrical generation, right? So, you know, the town of Strathmore has done that to some degree with starting with some solar panels and that, but many municipalities are working to the point where they generate 100% of their power needs themselves. So that might be again, part of the future discussion is, you know, in terms of long-term strategy with, that we can get into here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Carry on.
So the request to council is, if council supports us going into this hedging with AMSC, that they direct our CAO, Mr. Scoble, to sign the contract and deliver it to AMSC for tomorrow.
Thank you. Is anyone prepared to put a motion on the floor?
No,
Your worship, I would move.
no, I still have some questions.
Councillor
but I guess
Wiley
my
still has some
questions can
questions.
come after the
Oh,
motion.
sorry.
Sorry, the motion can go on the floor, and I still have some questions.
Your worship, I would move that council authorize the CEO to sign the Power Plus agreement with AMSC as presented in attachment 1.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor, and Councillor Wiley has a few questions.
Well, I'll just start by saying I am so pleased that our administration is looking at how to keep gas and electricity costs predictable. So this is awesome. Most of these questions are just because I don't understand. So I want to go back to this idea that the service provider, the contract we're signing is saying the service provider will get contracts for less than $66 per megawatt hour. What if they just can't? Like 2027 is just.
So the intent from AMSC is to put forward a request for proposal to send it to market to see what the providers will bring back. So they will be doing that over, you know, the next couple of weeks. And then they'll have answers.
And they're looking to sign 10-year contracts with these providers.
They're looking for 10-year contracts.
Okay, so they're really competing on today's market prices for 10 years. That answers a lot of the other questions I had.
Yes, thank you.
So they're going to put out these bids, and then and they understand we're not entering this for 5 more years. So when we enter, are we paying
When we enter, so
in
let's assume everything-
2027?
In 2027, then we would start getting bills instead of from our other 2 providers, the one that we're in right now, the one that's in that interim, till the end of 2026, we would then just pay another provider at that rate. And what I'm not clear on, or 100%, is will the provider bill AMSC, and then AMSC will then distribute the bills onward, or will they direct bill to the individual? But that's...
Okay, so just let me see if I understand you. So let's say this week, next week, they find a contract, some provider's willing to sell us for today's price of $53.15. In 5 years, when we enter into that pool, we would be paying those kinds of prices.
We would be
Okay,
paying the
well,
53.50. But really, so AMSC, for clarity, AMSC's target is 66. Within the agreement, it says 68. But so that's kind of the bandwidth they're playing with to see. And again, if AMSC doesn't get the numbers that they're happy with, they just won't proceed and they'll wait. And they'll do a subsequent RFP down the road. And at that point, we will either get an amendment or a new contract. So
Okay, the following question I just promised a constituent I would ask. I probably won't understand your answer, but I know he's watching, so he'll want to hear. When he read the agenda package, he said this looks more like a shared services procurement model and not hedging. When he had read in Strathmore Now that we'd signed into a hedging, he kind of panicked. That's why I got the call. So which is this? Is this a hedging, or is it what he's trying to describe it as?
sure. So when I hear kind of like a shared services, I picture that more as an internal, really big organizations, shared services like an IT or an HR, whatever, and they would cross-charge to different departments or different entities for those services. That's how I picture a shared service. It doesn't mean the way he's picturing it is wrong, because really what we're doing is we're taking one service, being electricity, we're going to share it or pool it through AMSC with all these other participants. So you could definitely see where you could use that definition.
Okay, well, I hope that satisfies him. Awesome. Thank you so much. This is excellent. So motion's on the floor.
Your worship,
Deputy Mayor?
one of the things that Councillor Wiley's talking about, I ran into that with questions too after the article, but I think people were confusing hedging with hedge funds and derivatives. And I think that created some of the confusion. It's not the same. But, that's my interpretation, and I will simply leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
All in favor?
Thank you, and that motion is carried. Thank you, Brenda. And we move now to capital projects prioritization matrix.
Point of order, Your Worship?
Oh, sorry.
That was also included
Yes,
in the omnibus
thank you.
motion.
Thank you. 8.4, capital request fire department water rescue program. Good evening, and if you wouldn't mind for the people at home to introduce yourself.
Good evening, David Sturgeon, Fire Chief for the town of Strathmore. Thank you for having me here tonight. The purpose of tonight's request is so I'll go back a bit. So in May 2022, a new level of service policy for the fire department was approved by council. Part of this, through this policy, Swiftwater Rescue was removed as it was out of our jurisdiction. Accordingly, the Swiftwater Rescue equipment was sold to Siksika Nation for $36,000. So that transaction's been complete. The new level of service policy specifically for water rescues within town requires the purchase of specific water rescue equipment that staff are outfitted appropriately and safely to be able to perform the rescue operation. So currently, a lot of emphasis was put on that Swiftwater rescue program and not enough for our internal rescue, which is surface water rescue and ice rescue for our lakes in town. And so through this, we would be, right now we already own the Zodiac, so we'd be trading in the motor that's on it because it's currently not big enough to provide the power for the boat. So we'd be trading that motor in, buying a new motor for that boat, as well as 8 survival suits, because our current survival suits are riddled with holes and things. So when they go in the cold water, we have some potential hypothermia issues for the rescuers, as well as an appropriate trailer to be able to get that boat onto our lakes, because a lot of them we can't drive right up to the lake. So we have to have a way of disconnecting it from the truck and getting into the lake in a short amount of time to provide that rescue. So the ask is for $28,000. We'd be using the capital reserve account, and the capital reserve is currently at $62,426.68, and that includes that $36,000 that was just put into that through the sale of the Swiftwater Rescue.
Thank you, Chief Sturgeon. That's the exact question I was going to ask, is did the $36,000 go into your reserve, and you answered it. So are there any questions for our chief? Councillor Wiley?
I'm just
Or
prepared
a motion,
to make a
thank you.
motion. The council approved $28,000 for the purchase of water rescue equipment from the fire department capital reserve.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. Is there any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And Councillor Mitzner? Councillor Mitzner, are you still there? You may be on mute if you're speaking, I'm not sure. Oh,
In favor. I just had to plug in because I lost my charge. Sorry.
thank you. Thank you very much, Chief Sturgeon,
Thank you.
for your presentation. And that brings us to 8.6, Center Trunk Sewer Upgrades, Strathpoint Development. Ethan, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. So our central sanitary trunk, as we refer to it, runs from about the south end of the golf course through the main part of town, through our industrial area, all the way down to our wastewater treatment plant. This sanitary line collects approximately 80% of the town's sanitary flow. And it is nearing its capacity and in some point has the potential to one day restrict development. So with that in mind, we've got a plan over the next 5 years to start replacing this line and upsize it and make sure that it allows development to continue without being hindered. Phase 1 of that project is scheduled for 2023. However, there is this new Strathpoint development where the former Leroy's Motel used to be. That development is a new commercial development which plans to be partially opened here late in 2022. The project itself bisects the Strathpoint property, and therefore the replacement of the sanitary line would cause significant disruption to that property if we were to do this project in 2023 as planned. As such, we've started to coordinate with the developer and go through options of seeing, what works for them, what works for the town, and we've come up with the possibility of them installing this sanitary line for us, and then the town reimbursing the costs of that. In order to do that, we would have the engineers that design the project be on site at the necessary points to make sure that it's done correctly. We would do our final inspections and all that, just like we would as if the town's contractors were completing the project. The projected cost of this segment is approximately $315,000, and we have included a small contingency within that amount. And then the funds for this project could either come from borrowing or debt, or it could come from our utility reserve. That utility reserve currently has a balance of about $850,000, and the recommendation of administration is to use that utility reserve. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Thank you, Ethan. Councillor Montgomery.
Thanks, Ethan. Is it unusual for like a trunk line to run through private property like that?
I would say it's not ideal, but not unusual. So this trunk line, as it goes through that property, once it crosses the highway, it actually goes through the backyard of pretty much every other property on the way to the wastewater treatment plant. So next year will be interesting. There will be a lot of coordination required with businesses in order to complete that project. So like I said, not unusual, but inconvenient.
Okay, great, thank you. If nobody else has any questions, I'll move it. I'll move the council approve the expenditure of $315,000 from the utility reserve to complete central trunk sewer upgrades through the Strathpoint development site.
Thank you for that motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Wiley?
Just for the people at home, I'm going to emphasize that the money's coming out of the utility reserve and not going from increasing debt.
Thank you for that clarification. I'll call the question. All in favor?
All in favor?
Thank you.
In favor?
Thank you. And that motion is carried. We move now, thank you, Ethan. We move now to 8.7 Vault Cultural Collective Report. Mr. Pretzlaff, you are presenting.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of the council. I apologize for not being able to present in person there. I'm a little under the weather. But as you can see in the report that's in front of you, administration met with the Cultural Collective following their presentation to council, and they identified a couple concerns and identified some funding requests of the council. One of their concerns was that their current MOA or Memorandum of Agreement would expire in September, and they would be without a lease or an agreement in place for the standard shoe building at 136 2nd Avenue. As such, administration is requesting that council extend the current memorandum of agreement to the end of December 31st, which will allow the Vault Cultural Collective to remain as the primary tenant of that space, and then direct their other requests to as a part of the budget process. I should also reference that the council should also consider waiving the $5,000 rent payment for the remainder of 2022. We identified some challenges through 2022 about designating that area as a visitor information center, and I think if moving forward, that's probably not the best ideal location for it. So if there's any questions from your worship of council, I'll be free to answer them.
Thank you for your report, Mark. Are there any questions for Mr. Pretzlaff? Seeing none, we're looking for the motions that are recommended. Councillor Wiley.
I'll move that council direct administration to extend the existing MOA with the Vault Cultural Collective until December 31st, 2022. And that council direct administration to waive the $5,000 lease payment for 2022. And the council direct administration to refer the $50,000 funding request from the Vault Cultural Collective to the 2023 budget planning process. And that council further direct administration to negotiating a new lease agreement for the 136 2nd Avenue for the Vault Cultural Collective until December 31st, 2026.
Thank you. And now that we have that motion on the floor, are there any discussion points or comments? So, Councillor Montgomery.
Just for public consumption, I guess, if Councillor Wiley wouldn't mind, I guess, just elaborating on the variation from the deviation from the recommended motion, please.
Sure. So the original recommendation from admin was to simply extend the MOA until the end of this calendar year. And I know that there's an army of volunteers working with the Vault Cultural Collective that would find that to be limiting on their ability to look forward. I know that they're ready to hit the ground running into the 2023 year, And they just want to see that council, I don't want to say that council is committed to working with them. I guess that's what I want to say. And so that these items in the new motion are showing them that in a way we've got their back. They're part of our 2023 budget planning process, that we are looking forward with them all the way to the extending of 2026. That those are the things that we're directing our administration to do. So I just think it's a way of us showing them that we're in this with them.
Thank you very much for responding to that. I would just like a comment from administration about just the aspect of extending. Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry. Now that I've actually read, so we're not actually okay. We're just negotiating.
Yeah. So if
okay.
I'm not sure why I'm getting feedback, but if you take a look, we're directing administration to negotiate the agreement. We're not at this time ahead of our budget process. We're not prepared to make those commitments yet.
Great. Thank you very much. That clears it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm just looking for a little bit of clarification on the final portion of the motion, stating that we'd be negotiating a new lease agreement for the Vault Cultural Collective until December 31st, 2026. But when I read the report from administration, it actually appears that we already have a lease agreement for that property until December 31st, 2026. So I'm just looking for a bit of confirmation. It says here, under background context, entered into a lease agreement with Ron and Kelly Work for the Standard Shoe Building, Lease agreement states that the town will pay $10,000 in rent for a term of 5. I'm assuming it should be years, January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2026. Maybe someone has an answer for me, perhaps Mark.
Yes, Your Worship, through the chair. The town has a 5 and 5 lease agreement with the Warks for the space. That first 5-year term would expire in January 2026. Obviously that's the point where it would be come up for an option for a renewal for another 5 years if both parties are in agreement. And that's why administration is recommending any lease agreement or any agreement with the Vault Cultural Collective only goes for that up to that first point, because obviously we don't know what would happen beyond 2026 at this time.
Okay, so if I don't know if I forgot to install Brain tonight. So do we, just as a straight yes or no, do we have a lease in place until 2026? Yes or no?
Yes, we have a 5-year lease with an option for another 5 years at that time.
Okay, so we would not need, so based on that information, this last portion of the motion stating that a new lease agreement until December 31st, 2026 wouldn't be required at this time, as we currently have a lease until 2026 with an option to extend for 5 years after that.
Yes, I believe so. I think I understand what you're saying.
Okay, well then in that case, I'd like to move to amend the amendment.
If I could
Councilor
clarify.
Montgomery?
So I believe Councillor Wiley's motion discusses the town negotiating with the Vault a lease for that period.
Okay, that's
and
what I'm
this,
missing.
Yeah, you're talking about the lease of the town.
Release
has
it.
with the Warks,
Thank
yeah.
you. That's where I did forget to install my Brain this evening. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Thank you. So we do have a motion on the floor. Oh, Deputy Mayor Peterson. I think you're muted.
I want to just say how appreciative I am of the work that's being done here, and just once again to recognize the Warks for this immense contribution they made to our downtown. I think that we cannot lose sight of the fact that there's been a multi thousands of dollar gift in terms of in kind that's been given over to the town so that we can carry on this work and not to lose sight of that. So I'm very mindful of the motion and the remarks made by Councillor Wiley. I'm very appreciative of them. And I don't think that we've begun to even see the tip of the iceberg, and it's not an iceberg, it's the tip of a wonderful opportunity that this is presenting for our downtown. And I'm wondering if our administration couldn't come up as well with some opportunities for the vault to report back as they prepare to work out additional lease arrangements. And what are the things that we need to know as a community and a council to understand the value added that they bring? And maybe there's something that our administration can guide them to in terms of what are the value of the sales that they have for the arts community? What is the assumed value for the advertising and ticket sales that they do? How many people are coming into the vault and into the downtown? And so I think looking at those things would be extremely useful, Your Worship. I just add that as a heartfelt suggestion. I really appreciate the work that Mark is already doing with the Culture Collective, and I just want to also speak to my being very much in favor of this motion and this process.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor?
I'm in favor.
Thank you, and the motion is carried. This brings us to item 8.8, campaign disclosure statement and financial statement, late filing fee. Chris, are you prepared to speak to this first, and then we can go from there?
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this item, basically the Local Authorities Election Act, which governs how municipalities conduct elections. And with this last election, there was a requirement that people who were in the election, that they fill out a disclosure statement by the deadline. And if they did not do that, then they would be required to pay a $500 late filing fee. And so in this last election, 4 individuals did not do that. And so in previous discussions, administration has recommended that because it will take staff time and other challenges, it may not be worthwhile to go through with this. So instead of spending that staff time and resources to try to recover that money, it might be more worthwhile to write it off. And so that's what the motion is, which is that council authorize administration to write off the campaign disclosure statement and financial statement late filing fees. But of course, council can decide to try to pursue this. And yeah, if you have any other questions, let me know.
Thank you. Just before we go to questions and comments, I just wanted to explain why I moved this from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. I was concerned about the precedent this might set as far as elections go, and that if people hear that we write off this, then they won't be all that keen or interested in getting their disclosure statements in. So I'm a little concerned about that. I want to try to protect the integrity of the elections. I know Kara worked really hard on the election of 2021 and all through the fall and into October. So I wasn't really in favor of drifting away from this or writing it off. I know it could take a lot of staff time, but I really was worried about the integrity of the election and the precedent that this might set. Councillor Wiley and then Councillor Wegener.
My concern is that people at home are going to think that we're writing off our own errors here. I'm just curious, is it part of the public record as to who?
Yes, that is correct. So all of the campaign disclosure statements, I believe, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they have been actually posted onto the website. So all the information is up there. What's important for council to know is that at least one and possibly more individuals that were subject to this late filing fee have since submitted their campaign disclosure statements. It was just that they were late. So that's just another piece for council to consider.
And so it's worth the public knowing that if they're curious as to if it's us who have not submitted our campaign disclosure forms, they're welcome to look. It's not.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Wegener.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I kind of agree with the mayor on this about the integrity issue of it. And Chris, I do know that it will take a lot of time and probably more money than what it's worth, but it is an integrity issue of it. I just wonder if there's something that could be done prior to that. I mean, right now, currently we paid a certain amount to enter the election of $250, which was returned if you required a certain percentage of the votes. Can we not up that to $750? That would cover the late fines if somebody does not file on time. So it'd be a huge jump in running for office from 250 to 750.
So I think it's something we'd have to kind of take away and look at our municipal election bylaw. I'm not entirely sure that would work, just because the deposit that's paid is very specific under the Local Authorities Election Act, that it's for like before the election, and so I'm not sure that you can kind of collect that $500 in advance, but we can certainly look into it. Again, the thing that I think council will want to think about with this is that in order to proceed with collections on this matter, it will actually require us to file with the court, which will mean that we will need to incur some legal costs and things like that as well.
And that I understand, and I know $2,000 is not a lot, but it is it kind of is the principle of it. And if we get people running for office and not filing, then it goes on and on and on. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wegener. Any other comments? So just to ask Legislative Services, sorry, I'll come right back to you, Deputy Mayor Peterson, if that's all right. To Legislative Services, how would we have a motion to stay the way we are, or would we just not? How would we proceed on this? If council feels strongly enough about this, would someone put a motion on the floor to continue on in our process, or how do we stand, Chris?
I believe you just wouldn't make a motion. Is that correct, Karen?
So I think you can do it kind of one of two ways. Council can choose not to pass this resolution. I do think that it would be probably clearer for administration if you did pass a resolution directing us to enforce this, just so again we have something clear on the books, and then that way too when we have to contact these individuals, it's very clear.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Deputy Mayor Peterson?
Thank you. I'm really mindful of what Kara said, that of the individuals that did not file, they have since filed. And the purpose of this penalty, or of the money that we ask for, is because we want open disclosure. And for the most part, it appears to me that we have that now, with one exception perhaps, I think. I would need clarification on that. But it's also a relatively new process, and changes to this are new, and not without the serious oversight of Kara and her team. I would have been one of those people who I thought I'd filed the paperwork, was convinced that I brought it in. They didn't have it, and I would have been paying $500, and I would have paid that being in arrears. But I think the key is the disclosure piece. And so Kara has information to that point.
Kara.
So thank you so much. So through the chair, I just want to confirm that yes, there's only one individual, Mr. Chase, who has not filed a disclosure statement according to what's been posted on our website. And I know John has been keeping this information updated. So that's the only one that has not actually been received by the town. Everybody else has filed.
Thank you for that.
So to conclude, Your Worship, that's what I think that the diligence of our town staff to this date have already accomplished what we needed to accomplish in terms of disclosure for our public, and people know who didn't disclose, and that tells its own story in terms of future elections and future public scrutiny. And I really appreciate how really hard they work to fulfill this requirement of government. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery, and then Councillor Wiley.
I guess one question I have is, could we make, could we make enrolling in future elections contingent on having paid any sort of fees like this? So if like one of these people wants to run again, you know, they either paid at that time. Is that possible?
So under the Local Authorities Election Act, they actually won't be eligible to run if they haven't submitted their forms.
Okay, so if they haven't submitted them now for this previous election, they wouldn't be able to run in the next one?
Correct. If they don't submit them, they will not be able to run.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And sorry to put council, so was it Councillor Peterson, or sorry, Deputy Mayor Peterson, did you file yours on time?
I guess I did file it on time, Jason. What I was saying was that if it hadn't been, I just wanted to point out that it was the scrutiny of our staff that allowed every single person who ran in the election to have the fullest attention. They tried extremely hard to make sure that, I'm sure they did the same thing with me that they did with every other person. So I filed on time, but and the ones that didn't, it wasn't for lack of oversight of our staff. That was the point I was trying to make.
I see, okay. And is there anybody who filed late but is not included in this 4 people here?
Sorry, say that again?
Is this like, so it's like we're talking about like 4 people that didn't file on time.
Correct.
Was there anybody besides the 4 that didn't file on time, or was it just 4 people that didn't file on time?
So it would only be the 4 that didn't file on time, because those are the ones that are subject to the late filing, filing fee. And so, like I said, the one that we haven't received, I mean, we've tried using phone numbers, emails. Unfortunately, nothing seems to be correct anymore. And so we sent letters, registered letters. We've definitely tried to get in touch with this individual as well. And so if by some chance he sees this and he can bring in his papers, that's great. That's great too.
Okay, if you're all right, I'd like to make a motion. Okay, I'll move the council authorize administration to write off the campaign disclosure statement and financial statement late filing fees totaling $2,000. So, and I'll speak to that, I guess. So it's not like the town is out actual money, aside from the time that they've put in trying to get these people to file. I think that the mayor and Councillor Wagner, I think you guys make good points about integrity and about, having to, and I'm very big on following processes, so that kind of made it stick for me, I guess. I hate the idea of spending more money, I guess, chasing this, possibly, and then, having, spending more than $2,000 to get $2,000. And I think I'm satisfied with the idea or the stipulation that that anybody that wants to run in a future election would have to file this, and so I think that's enough of a stick, I guess, for me, and that makes it okay to avoid going after these people and spending more money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Wiley, and then Councillor Wegener.
I was just curious, for the sake of the councillors who are still thinking about pursuing this, does administration have any kind of a ballpark estimate of what it might cost? I know that's a big ask at this point.
I would hate to speculate, because again, this is a relatively new process, so it's not something that any of us have had to go through in terms of collecting on this previously. But like I said, there would be definitely court costs for filing, and there would be legal costs, which generally are not inexpensive. and that would have to run through the entire process. So from filing to then proceeding with collection efforts and things like that, that can be fairly costly for a relatively small amount.
Thank you for that clarification too, and that question, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Wegener?
Upon just further discussion here, unless I missed it someplace, I didn't see where the people had actually filed. So it's just a monetary issue with the late filing of one person who is unreachable. So for that, I am happy to support this motion with, hopefully, if you could look into the raising of the fees. I missed that on my notes. So that's where I stand now.
Thank you, Councillor Wegener. And this is one of the reasons why I'm quite glad we could remove this from the consent agenda, because I was able to get clarification. And Kara, thank you for that information on the one former candidate who will not be able to run in the next election. That makes a big difference to me too. And I really don't want to chase a small amount of money and have to spend a ton of money as well. So that has helped me a great deal. So if there's no further questions or comments, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
In favor.
And the motion is carried. And we move now to 9 bylaws. 9.1, Strathmore Overnight Shelter Loan Repeal Bylaw number 22-22. Brenda, welcome back. How have you been?
Good evening, Council. I'm here to present the Strathmore Overnight Loan, Shelter Loan Repeal Bylaw 22-22. Tonight's ask is for first reading only. The purpose of the original bylaw was to lend money to the Strathmore Overnight Shelter during the early part of COVID. It was a very short-term loan to which it was lent out in 2020. It was repaid in 2020 with the interest also being paid on top of it. The town followed the requirements within the MGA by ensuring that they were all filled out, like the advertisement, the length of the loan, the interest rate, and so on. And so with that all now being done and taken care of, we would like to repeal this. And to be able to repeal, one of the things that the MGA, the Municipal Government Act, states is that we have to follow the same requirements as the original bylaw, which at that point required 2 weeks advertising. So we then, for this repeal, also have to do 2 weeks advertising, hence the purpose for only first reading tonight. Is there any questions?
Councillor Montgomery and then Councillor Wegener.
So one question I have is, like, what happens? And this is just like, this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to happen, obviously. But what happens if this bylaw was to get voted down?
Legislative services.
Your Worship, I can't hear the speaker.
Okay, did you hear Councillor Montgomery?
No, Your Worship, I
Okay.
can't hear him when he's.
Okay, thank you.
My question was just, what happens if this bylaw gets voted down?
I think I can speak to that. I believe then it's just on the books, you know, taking up space and being kind of a red tape headache instead of, it probably wouldn't affect anything, but then it's another bylaw we have to be on top of and you know, show that it's active, put on the website, all sorts of things like that.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Wegener.
I'm just prepared to put a motion forward.
Thank you.
I move that council give first reading to bylaw number 2222, being the Strathmore Overnight Shelter Loan Repeal Bylaw, and that council direct administration to advertise bylaw number 2222 in accordance with the Municipal Government Act.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
Your Worship,
Deputy Mayor Peterson?
I just want to point out that this action on the part of the town was taken under extraordinary diligence. They knew that the shelter was had been approved for a grant, and they knew that the money would be forthcoming through that. And so I just want to assure the public, those at home, that the financial services of the town undertook great due diligence when they put this money forward. It was for a really critical period of time, and they did it in the knowledge that it would be repaid. And I just want to say that it was a wonderful gesture on the part of the community to be able to support this at a really critical time. And I support the motion, and I really thank administration for their work. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will call the question. All in favor?
In favor.
And the motion is carried. Thank you again, Brenda.
Thank you.
That brings us to 9.2, Community Standards Amending Bylaw number 22-24, which is on page 189. Councillor Montgomery.
I will move that council give first reading to bylaw number 22-24, being a bylaw to amend the community standards bylaw number 13-05.
Thank you. We have a motion for first reading. All in favor?
In favor.
And the motion carries.
I will move the council give second reading to bylaw number 22-24, being a bylaw to amend the community standards bylaw number 13-05.
Thank you very much for that motion. Now that we have a motion for second reading, is there discussion on that? Councillor Wiley?
Not so much a discussion, but again, for the people at home, we had an entire committee of the whole meeting on this community standards amending bylaw, and we're very familiar with it, so we're not just rushing through this piece of legislation.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wiley. We have a motion on for second reading. I'll call the question. All in favor?
In favor.
And that motion is carried.
I will move that council give unanimous consent to a third and final reading of bylaw number 22-24, being a bylaw to amend the community standards bylaw number 13-05.
Thank you. All in favor?
In favor.
That motion is carried.
I will move that council give third reading to bylaw number 22-24, being a bylaw to amend the community standards bylaw 13-05.
And thank you. All in favor?
In favor.
And that motion is carried as well. We move now to 10. Councillor information and inquiries. 10.1, questions between councillors and or council statements. Anything from any of the councillors tonight? Seeing none, boards and committee reports. We have 10.2.1. You have it in your agenda packages, the WADEMSA monthly meeting report for June 28th, 2022. And that's on page 224 of your 225 of your agenda package. Councillor Langmaid.
Point of order, Your Worship. That one was actually
Oh,
also
right,
included in
sorry.
our omnibus motion.
Sorry, it's in the consent agenda too. I'll get better at that one day before. Yeah, thank you. 2025, I might figure it out.
Your Worship, I have a question, if it's appropriate, related to this.
Okay, thank you.
So I know that I'm lucky to sit on committees with Councillor Wagner, and he's really carries a lot of oversight in terms of reporting. But I notice that we don't get a lot of reports from our other committees, and I'm just wondering about that. It's certainly something that I'm very interested in, and I'm wondering if at some future point if we could revisit that.
Sure, and maybe that's, I think CAO Scoble was saying, or we were talking recently about potentially having council discussions on a fairly regular basis that could possibly deal with that as well. But yeah, I understand what you're asking, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Montgomery.
Oh, I was going to mention, I'm sure you probably saw Deputy Mayor Peterson. I put the community.
I can't hear you, Councillor.
Oh, I put the annual report for Community Futures in the agenda for you for that purpose. Thank you.
Yeah, I did see that one.
So Deputy.
I only saw one report though. Has there only been one meeting? Like, did I miss others?
Like for Community Futures?
Yeah.
Well, there was just that annual report. I mean, like,
I read that. Yeah.
yeah, if you like, I could start putting minutes in or something like that.
I would really appreciate the reports, like just like we do with all our other committees. But that's just me. Maybe it's like I said, a discussion point, Your Worship.
Thank you. If I could turn to Kara. Kara, is it, in the past, we've had monthly reports or fairly regular reports for things like Community Futures or the Chamber of Commerce. Is that what you're also talking about, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, and all of our committees, Your Worship, the library, the handy bus, like, I really appreciate reading the library reports that we get. Marigold, I think, is a really key one, happens only 4 times a year, but all of those are really key. And I know that we haven't put money into the handy bus at this point, so I don't know where that status lay, but we still have an agreement, I think.
Okay,
Maybe.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that moves us to the question and answer period, 10.3. Do we have any questions or answers? And seeing none, we go now to 10.4, administrative inquiries, playground equipment at Hillvale Crescent. And I've been advised that as part of the, oh, Councillor Langmaid, sorry.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I think I must be outside of your peripheral vision over here, or perhaps just a little bit too short. I think maybe it's a height thing. Deputy Mayor Peterson, I just wanted to give you a little update from the library. We've been working on improving our minutes procedures and availability of the minutes once they have been confirmed by the board. So you should be seeing more regular library board minutes coming to the meetings and being submitted for review on a monthly basis soon here, this fall, considering that we're actually currently off for the summer. And then also for Marigold, we have another meeting coming up actually this Thursday, which unfortunately I won't be able to attend, but I will submit the minutes for that meeting so you can be aware of things that are going on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Langmaid, and I'm sorry I missed you. We move now to administrative inquiries, and I've been told by Legislative Services that with our administrative inquiries, they need to be read out loud to make them official. So my first administrative inquiry is 10.4.1 on playground equipment at Hillvale Crescent in the Hillview subdivision. This is the subdivision that's close, or this is the area of the subdivision that's closest to the 817 highway. So the inquiry is, are there any plans to install playground equipment in the large green space at Hillview Crescent? As of now, parents and kids may need to cross the 817 highway to use the playground at the agricultural grounds. And the second part of the inquiry is, what would the cost be for the purchase and installation of playground equipment at this location? My second administrative inquiry is honoring the potential honoring of Leroy Flamond. And it states, Leroy Flamond was Métis and moved at a young age to Calgary, where he became a very successful boxer. He worked as an inspector for the city of Calgary for 17 years before moving to Strathmore and buying motel. He was a longtime resident of Strathmore, and I'm wondering if the town's communications team could reach out to Leroy's family and possibly write a feature highlighting him. Could this feature possibly be submitted to the Strathmore Times and published on our Facebook page? The second part of the inquiry is, lastly, I'd like to suggest council discuss the possibility of naming the road from the four-way stop at Center Street in front of the car wash, going west through Lakeside Boulevard to the 817 highway. My rationale would be that Leroy lived in Strathmore for many years, was a successful business owner of 3 places along that stretch of road, and was very supportive of many people in need. As part of this, could we look into any pertinent policies regarding the naming of things such as this road as well? And just as a quick little addition to that, I've been in contact with the late Leroy Flamond's son, Fraser, and we have been trying to gather information on the different service groups he and his wife supported, as well as vulnerable people in our community over the many years that Leroy and his wife lived and owned businesses here. Thank you for that. We move now to 10.5, notices of motion. I don't believe we have any tonight. Correspondence, you have in your agenda packages under 11.1, you have in your agenda packages the Community Futures Wild Rose Annual Report for 2021 to 2022. Are there any comments arising out of that report that's in our agenda packages? Comments or questions? Seeing and hearing none, then all we need now is a motion to go into the in-camera or closed session of our meeting. Mark? Councillor Langmaid? Sorry, Councillor Regu, this time I didn't see you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move the council move in camera to discuss items related to sections 19, subsection 2, and section 24, subsection 1A of the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act at 7:52 p.m.
Thank you for that motion. Any discussion? All in favor? And we are going in camera. And to the public at home, thank you for staying tuned and watching throughout.